everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am Crafting Journey and you are watching Crafting and Crime Daily, the show where I recap live trials. I am on the lunch break from my live. Part one this morning was the closing arguments by the prosecution and the state in the retrial of Mark Jensen for the death of his wife by ethylene glycol poisoning, also known as antifreeze, and suffocation. So, pretty convincing arguments, both sides. Although the defense never explained why, even if you assume everything they say is true, the defense's argument, why didn't this man call for an ambulance when his wife couldn't breathe and was so ill? He didn't go to work. He's there at the home. He's searching ethylene glycol poisoning, but he's not getting her any medical attention. Even if you assume she was trying to commit suicide, why aren't you getting her medical attention? Take her to the doctor. Okay, anyway. So I did want to talk to you about the Alex Murdaugh case. Yes, so we got to see the second interview yesterday of Alex Murdaugh. And before, this is another, it takes place on June 10th. Now, the murders were on the 7th, I believe. I'd have to go back pretty far here. Anyway, and they're also done in a vehicle. We don't see a video of this. I'm just hearing the audio. And this is what everyone's hearing, the audio of this interview. And before the interview begins, Alex is taking a call from his sister-in-law. And he ends that call. And then the first thing they discuss is they want to look at his phone, his cell phone. And he's like, oh, sure. He says, but, I have attorney-client privilege information on that phone, which is probably true, either in the form of text or phone calls or whatever, most especially the text. And they said, that's not to worry. We have what did they call it? I forget what they called it. But they said, we have an attorney, that's his job. He will screen that, and if there's anything attorney-client privilege, he'll redact it out of the final transcript of whatever we get off your phone. So Alex is like, oh, okay, all right. Then they have this good old boy conversation about who's related to who and who lives where, and did you, whatever. It was, South Carolina speak. So then the investigator asked him, said, take me through your day on Monday. What did you do that day? Just walk me through it. So he said, my wife and older son, Buster, went to a ball game. And then they yucking it up about the ball game. What ball game was it? Oh, they didn't have any more ball games after that. I think it was football, I don't know. Maybe it was baseball. I have no idea. So then he said he went to work. He doesn't remember what time he went to work. He doesn't remember if the housekeeper had already come. Blanca, the housekeeper, had already come or not. Doesn't remember any of that. But, and they said, well, what were you working on that day? Well, I was working on some motions in the Dominion Energy case. And I was working on some motions, I'm involved in this boat crash civil lawsuit where they're suing me personally. So I was involved in some motions with that too. Oh, okay. Sounds reasonable. But he left early that day because his son, Paul, was coming home. Now, he says Paul has an apartment in Columbia, but he was in Charleston for the weekend, staying with his brother John, Alex's brother John, Uncle John to Paul, because he works for Uncle John, and so, I don't know, he spent the night with Uncle John. But he was coming home, and he came home early, so he comes home from work early as well, and they go riding around the property, this 1,700 acres, for over an hour. They were looking for hogs, doing some target practice where they were shooting bottles with a .22 Magnum. They went to look at the corn, because he had planted some corn and his son had planted some corn, and so they were laughing about, hey, mine's doing better than yours and whatever. So then when they get home, and he said it was broad daylight, they were out in broad daylight, but he thinks around 5 p.m. And they get home, and Maggie is home when they got back. But she had been at a doctor's appointment. He couldn't remember what doctor it was that she had gone to see. Then he said, we all sat down and had supper. And then afterwards, pardon me, afterwards, he said, Paul left. I don't know where he went. I'm assuming he went down to the kennels. And then Maggie said she was going down to the kennels. And so they said, remember that question I asked yesterday? How did they get to the kennels? He said, well, Maggie usually drives, but she's been known to walk. He goes, but I really don't know. So, interesting. Then he stayed there, and he was watching some television, and he fell asleep. When he wakes up, he calls Maggie, and she didn't answer, so he texts her, and he doesn't get a response because he wants to go visit his mom. Dad had just been hospitalized. His mom is at home with late-stage Alzheimer's, and his plan was to go visit mom. Well, their plan was to go visit, but he knows Maggie's not real keen on that, so he just decided to go without her. So he goes, and on his way, and here's the strange thing. He says, before he left to go visit his mom, he thought he heard Paul and Maggie pull up. He says, I thought I heard a car pull up. Then when he went outside to leave, he saw something run by, and he thinks it was a cat. He said, could have been a person, but I don't think so. I think it was a cat. And then, so he drives to his mom, and he's making several phone calls on the way. There and back, he talks to his brother John, he talks to his son Buster, he talks to somebody named Chris Wilson. He said, I made multiple phone calls, but I talked to Shelly, my mom's caretaker, I visited with mom, and then I left. And when he got back home, he went in the house. Nobody was there, so he decided, I'm going to drive down to the kennels. When he drives down the kennels, he sees Maggie, he sees Paul, he knows it's really bad, so he jumps into his truck, and he goes back to the house, grabs his AR-style Assault 301 assault rifle, and jumps back in the car and goes back to the kennels. And he said, the whole thing had me freaked out, but he says, I called 911. And he said, the next question is, does anybody stand out in your mind that would have something against Maggie or Paul? And he's like, I cannot think of anyone. I just don't know. But then they start talking about threats that Paul received, in-person threats regarding the boating accident. So then he was asked, what was your biggest issue with Paul? And he says, he was irresponsible. He would leave clothes everywhere. He said he's got ADHD. He'd finish things. He'd start things and then wouldn't finish them. He'd leave clothes. This boy has clothes all over the state. He'd go to stay with somebody, and I'd say, aren't you packing a bag? No, I have clothes over there. He'd leave guns everywhere. Yeah, very irresponsible. So they said, again, how was your relationship with Maggie? And he says, as good as it could possibly be. Wonderful. We didn't have much to argue about. Okay. So then at some point he starts crying, and at some point during this interview, now I don't know if they didn't show the whole interview, because I did not hear this. I don't know if this witness is still on the stand today. At some point during this interview, Alex Murdaugh is heard saying, I did him so bad. Now, it's a huge controversy all over the internet right now. Did he say, I did him so bad, or they did him so bad? But this investigator said he heard, I did him so bad. But he said, I just made a note of it, and I listened to a little bit of the cross-examination from this morning, and the cross-examination was, well, why didn't you do anything about it? He said, you think he's admitting to this crime and you're not doing anything about it? He goes, well, it was very early in the investigation. I made note of it. We were going to interview him again, and it'll come up. And after that, they started about funeral arrangements. Now, I do remember hearing the funeral arrangement discussion. They were asking, are you guys going to have a funeral for Maggie and Paul? And he says, well, they're not, their bodies aren't going to be ready yet, but we're going to go ahead and have a funeral. And he's like, is it going to be a closed funeral, open funeral? Are you going to invite everybody? It's going to be open, but we don't want the press. So, okay. That's where we stand on the Alex Murdaugh trial. Always so interesting. And all these news agencies, outlets are, you turn it on in the morning and they're all standing outside the courthouse. And the cameras are there and we get to, and it's raining. They're all getting rained on. And we get to see Alex come into the courthouse and he's in handcuffs because he's in custody. And it's funny about the chat. They're like, oh, he's going to walk. And I'm thinking, he is not going anywhere. Even if, assuming you buy his defense, it's not me, somebody else, and he's found not guilty, like, O.J. Simpson. He's gotten over 90 other financial crimes he's charged with that he is not going to get away with. He's going to be in jail for a long, long time. Yeah. And he doesn't look like he's faring very well in jail. He seems like he's got a little bit of a tick, and his head just kind of does. I don't know if he's got like early Parkinson's or it's just an observation on my part. Anyway, so I hope you guys, if you did not get a chance to see the closing arguments in the Jensen retrial, I hope you guys can take a look at those, especially the opening by the female prosecutor. She did a brilliant job of just laying this all, just laying it out all on the table. Now, the defense was, he was very monotonous, very boring, and I didn't think very convincing. Didn't spend enough time where he should have spent some time. That's just my opinion. But take a look. After lunch, I'm going to be doing part 2, which is the prosecution's rebuttal of the part of the closing arguments. And then this will go to the jury. So I will cover a jury verdict live when that happens. I don't anticipate it will be today. We're not starting the rebuttal till 1:45. So assuming that's 45 minutes to an hour, because we know this is going to be done by Attorney Jamboys, and he likes to talk. I assume it's probably going to be an hour, but maybe not. So then you're put at 2:45. So the jury probably gets this by 3 because there's some more instructions that go along with the jury. And he's going to let them deliberate until they want to, they're not sequestered, until they want to stop deliberating. So, but I think they've got a lot to talk about, including the fact that one of the jurors used to date the con guy, the jailhouse snitch. His sister used to date the jailhouse snitch. Remember that whole thing, But they kept him on the jury. Yeah. So, yeah, explain that one. So, yeah, I'll cover the verdict live. I don't think it'll be today. Probably going to be tomorrow. So, thank you guys for watching. I know this was a short edition. This is the Alex Murdaugh Update Edition. If you get a chance to, if I can pinpoint where that actual statement is in the interview, because like I said, I listened to it again and I don't think I heard it. It was so fast. I did him so bad or they did him so bad. Let me know which one you think you heard. If I can find it, I'll play it in tomorrow's show. But have a great, what is it? It's Tuesday. Have a great Tuesday, guys. I'll see you all tomorrow in Crafting and Crime Daily. Take care. Bye.